Hola, chess people. Welcome back. We're going to look at a classic from 2015. Millionaire Chess. The last time it was held in Las Vegas. This is from the open section. Player with the white pieces, Vignesh Panchanatham from Cupertino, California. At the time this game was played, playing against Grandmaster Varuzhan Akobian. Vignesh was a FIDE master back then, if I recall correctly. At the time of this recording, he is an IM. Grandmaster Akobian, the year before this game was played, tied for first in the United States Chess Championship. And in the 2021 US Championship, I didn't see Var playing in St. Louis for the first time in I don't know how long. He's always playing in the US Championship, it seems. This is from the first round, from Millionaire Chess. And back then, Millionaire Chess was, everybody was talking about it. The first couple editions, it was a big deal here in the West Coast. Everybody was, Millionaire Chess, Millionaire Chess, Millionaire Chess, Millionaire Chess, Millionaire Chess. Everybody was talking about Millionaire Chess. Coach Ricardo went, Coach Ted went, a lot of the top Scholastic players from the Bay Area went as well. And a lot of us didn't go. I didn't go, but we watched it on the live stream. I watched it live. I don't know. Twitch didn't exist back then, so it was on their website or YouTube was live back then. I'm not sure how I was able to watch the stream, but I watched it on my iPhone, which also has something to do with Cupertino. So here, this channel, of course, is biased. This is not an unbiased channel. I will root for the underdog. I will root for the kid. I will be very predictable in that way. Some of my students have pointed this out recently. My apologies, but I find that to be very true in chess, that ratings don't matter. Age doesn't matter. I wish we could compare chess players by height. That would benefit me, but no, it doesn't work that way. All chess cares about are moves. Not how old you are, where you're from, where you're not from. Nothing matters but moves in chess. Everybody is equal. So, here we go. This is the first round. Now, they didn't have a live board hooked up, at least not on the stream that I was watching, but they had the ticker at the bottom, which has all the results. And if you're watching the stream, you're watching the ticker. So we were watching. Here we go. Vignesh has the white pieces. D4. Knight F6. C4. We're going to be making notes as we go through the game. Let's go ahead and add one. Open with the center pawn. That may be trivial, but that's okay. I believe Vignesh went to Harker at the time this game was played. Harker went on to win a national high school chess championship when Vignesh was attending there. E6 to prepare D5 and D5. All right, knight C3 in D-pawn systems. In D-pawn systems, do not block the C-pawn with the knight. Let's add that to our notes. D-pawn systems, do not block the C-pawn with the knight. Why? Because you want the C-pawn to be able to help in the center. Here, the C-pawn is helping for control of the center, whereas if it cannot move and is limited by the knight on C3, if it's on C2, it will not be able to help in the center. It can't even move. So you want the C-pawn to be able to help. Now, there are exceptions. Some of you, if you play a London, you all play the knight C3. That's very trendy these days. Go ahead and do that. That is cool. No problemo. So, knight C3. Bishop E7. We see an exchange variation here. Bishop G5 and C6. Queen C2, castle. Okay. Grandmaster Akobian, castles first. Let's add that to our notes. Castle first. I met Grandmaster Akobian at NorCal House of Chess in Fremont a long time ago. I think Adi must have been in first grade, something like that. I saw him there. Siva dropped him off. And Var was giving a simul, and you could feel his energy during the simul. I wasn't playing in the simul. It was for his students he was working with, about a dozen or so. And he was that focused, that intense, and not in a negative way. You could feel his energy. I've never experienced that from another chess player ever. It was impressive, to say the least. So, Akobian castles. E3, preparing to develop the king's bishop, and then castle. Knight e4. Okay, we're going to have a little bit of a mix-up here. Knight e4 is a freeing move. Take, 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 move the knight. If you're the black pieces and you've got a queen's gambit decline where your d-pawn goes to e4, what you want to do is keep it. Here, some players may get squished with the black pieces. If you're using a system where this pawn goes from d5 to e4, it gives you a lot of space, and you want to keep the pawn. Typically, we use the f-pawn to sustain the e4 pawn, and you're going to play c5 and rip open the center at some point. You're going to prepare it. But white has not yet castled and black has, so this is something similar to a Lasker maneuver, and a queen's gambit declined. Lasker, not maneuver, excuse me, Lasker variation. Lasker maneuver is a rook ending. So, okay, knight retreats to d2, and instead of... Whoops. Instead of f5, we see bishop f5. Bishop f5. Bishop e2. Knight d7. Do not neglect development of the queen's knight. Let's add that. Neither player has here, of course. Do not neglect development of the queen's knight. Get it into play early. It's a slow piece, a short-range piece. It needs a head start. As you can tell, this is not Mavis Beacon teaching chess. Otherwise, I'd be typing a lot faster. This is Coach Matthew. Knight d7. b4. I really like this move by Vignesh. Is the pawn safe? No. Can black take the pawn? No. The great chess players defend through tactics. They defend through tactics. They make it too dangerous to take. If the queen were to take, which does not happen, if the queen were to take rook b1, the rook is in play early, and this b7 pawn is coming off the board. The rook will chop this pawn already on the 7th rank, in play. Wonderful. That pawn may not be captured. b4 takes some space on the queen side. Rook fe8. Rook b1. So, Akobian finishes development. Let's add that to our list. Finish development. All of black's pieces are now in play. a4. Vignesh takes the queen side. He's got a lot more space. Queen h4 is a very provocative move. Black has now invaded again on the king side. Do not castle into the opponent's space. Black is going to bring superiority of force on this king if Vignesh immediately castles. Now, he would like to be able to castle safely on the king side, but you can't do so right now. This queen is up to no good on h4. This is a big problem. How should white deal with the queen on h4? Exactly the way Vignesh plays it. We see h3. Knight f3 doesn't work. Knight f3 doesn't work. This king is going to be stuck in the middle. These trades do not work in white's favor. h3, you can't just outright play g3. If you play g3 before h3, the queen will go to h3, and you cannot castle through check. It's going to be a very annoying position for white. So h3 first. Let's pass. What if black does nothing? What is white's next move? g3. Hitting the queen. The queen has to leave. Take it from there. The queen is getting repelled from white's king side. h5 is a move that I think has considerable drawbacks. Does black have to play h5? No. Don't move pawns in front of the castled king unless you have to. Let's add that to our notes. They become targets, as this h5 pawn will be. Once the shield gets extended away from the body, it can't go back in chess. This pawn is on h5 and can be targeted. Attack once, sustained once. h5. g3 now to hit the queen. The queen leaves. Knight c4. Where is the knight going next? Anytime a chess player moves a knight, that is a question that we want to ask. And of course, this channel is intended for the U2100 crowd. Of course, this game is from the open section, but we want to know where the knight is going next. This knight, where is it going next? Clearly, it's going to d6 to fork. Let's add that to our notes. Where is the knight going next? It's going to day? No. Perhaps dawn instead of day. All right. Black has to stop the fork, so we see rook e6. Queen d1. A nice maneuver to target the h-pawn. And if I'm the black pieces here, I'm a little annoyed as to how to deal with this threat. First of all, I'm not going to just give the pawn to the white army. So how do you sustain the pawn? What do you do? Well, do you want to move another pawn in front of your castled king? Probably not. So that means it's going to have to be a piece. We see knight f6. If the pawn were to be pushed, we would see some sort of g4, and this king can step up to d2 for security. Knight f6 to sustain the pawn. b5. The knight moves from f6, going to d5. Where is this knight going next? It's making a bigger threat. It's going to c3. Where is the knight going next? This knight is going to c3. Beginner chess players, one of the reasons why they lose is a knight fork. It's very common. So those of us who are beginning players at home watching this, be wary of the knight. It is a tricky piece. It does not move linearly. All the other pieces move in a line, except for the knight, in terms of the squares on the chessboard, that is. So, be mindful of the knights. This knight is going to c3. It has to be stopped from forking. Queen b3 to sustain the c3 square. c5. c5 makes a very nasty threat. Now, Akobian has already finished development. Vignesh hasn't castled yet. He is walking a very fine line. Now, he's been doing more important things, and his king is still safe. However, here, if white simply passes, black will take on d4. and open lines of attack to the white king. If this pawn ends up taking, this e4 pawn will crash through. And things are opening up to the white king. This is not in white's favor at all. Open lines of attack to the opponent's king. That's exactly what c5 is trying to do. Let's add that to our notes. Open lines of attack to the opponent's king. So white must sustain d4 again. The e-pawn may not take. Rook d1. So if the c-pawn takes on d4, the rook will take on d4. The rook will take. This e-pawn is not going anywhere. Knight b4. Perhaps sneaking into d3. And black has a lot of force in the neighborhood of this white king. White to play. What do we do with the white pieces here? Well, in chess you have moments like this from time to time where you have an opportunity, perhaps a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And here Vignesh has that and takes advantage of the opportunity, and well, he's in millionaire chess. He cashes in with this position here with the white pieces. He goes for it because he can. He's put himself in this position, and now it's time to reap the rewards. White to play. What do you do? You need a trump, an advantage they cannot top. The opponent cannot top here. d5. White has a passer with a rook already behind it. Pawn d5. We're in the middle game. This is not the end game. However, passed pawns are not to be underestimated at all. This pawn is very dangerous to the black army. There's nothing blockading it currently. It's already making a threat. It's got a rook behind it. This pawn is dangerous. Black must stop this pawn. I'm just going to add passed pawn. Passed pawn is a pawn that cannot be stopped by the opponent's pawns. No black pawn can stop the d5 pawn. No black pawn can stop this pawn. Only pieces, which makes this pawn a very annoying problem for black. Don't know why that happens. All right. So d5, hitting the rook. The rook has to move. Goes to f6. h4. With the rook going to f6, it's limiting the queen. And with h4 now, of course, Vignesh wants to castle, so you can't hang the h-pawn. You do have to play h4, and you play it now, so the queen has to go to a weird square somewhat. She goes to h6 here. Not an ideal location, generally speaking, for the queen. Queen c3. The black queen is somewhat out of play. Yes, she can slide laterally. But where's this white queen going next? She's going to e5. She's in the center. The queen does prefer the center. Vignesh's queen is better. Queen c3. Rook e8 to prevent queen e5. This queen comes to e5. It's bad news bears. Or maybe tigers? I don't know. For the black pieces. So rook e8 to restrict queen e5. Vignesh castles now. What move are we on? 20-something? We're 24 moves into the game, and he now castles. Has his king been safe the entire time? Yes, he's ensured that. So let's add that to our notes. Castle when you should, not necessarily when you can. Now, we do want to castle first. Yes. Castle when you should, not when you can. And I don't like using the word should, but it is appropriate here. Now, if there's more important things to do, and your king is still safe without castling, do the more important things. But make sure your king is safe. White castles. Bishop h3. Clearly threatening to win the exchange. What do we do with the white pieces here? Do you play rook f to e1 or not? Those of you watching, go ahead and pause the video and ponder what you would do in this situation. And once again, put yourself in the shoes of the player with the white pieces. Now, once again, this is Millionaire Chess 2015. I was watching coverage live, not this board live, but coverage live. And Panchanatham - Akobian is one of the matches on the ticker, of course, in the open section. And you're a freshman in high school. You're playing against one of the players who tied for first in the previous year's U.S. Chess Championship? What do you do in this situation? Do you react to the opponent? No. You make them react to you. You go for it. Because you can. You're already there. He's already there. He's entered the tournament. You don't enter a chess tournament in order to not try to take advantage of such situations. You go for it. You go for it. Here, he goes for it. d6. That pawn is a beast. Now, black doesn't have to take the rook. Black doesn't have to take a rook. Take the rook. He does on f1. Bishop takes. So, of course, bishop takes. And where's this bishop going next? It can possibly go to h3 to really knife in to this black queen side and also sustain the pawn potentially on d7. And that pawn is going to d7 at some point very soon. d6 and d7. Boom. That pawn is a nightmare. Threatening the rook. The rook has to move and blockade. It goes to d8. White wants action via the pawn. Queen e5. Where is the queen going next? What is white's threat? Vignesh is going to play queen e8 check to promote his d-pawn. That move must be stopped. Queen e8 must be stopped. There's only one way to do it. Rook e6. So the target is the d8 rook. The d8 rook is blockading the pawn. Compare the rooks on the d file. Which rook would you rather have? I think we'd rather have the d1 rook. Now the target is the d8 rook. You can approach a target from multiple angles. The e file has been cut off for the queen. So Vignesh plays queen c7. You can approach a target from multiple angles. Let's add that to our list. One way is cut off, find another way. So queen c7, the rook must be sustained. It cannot move. The d-pawn will promote. Queen f6 to sustain. There's no choice, and Vignesh picks off the a-pawn. So now Vignesh is playing on the queen side to do what? Create another weakness. Principle of two weaknesses. Let's add that to our list. Principle of two weaknesses. I realize we are not in the endgame, but nonetheless, black has big trouble on the queen side. Principle of two weaknesses. They stop one weakness, they can't stop the other. If they're spread out, typically, and one is not going to be enough. This pawn, will it be enough by itself? No. White needs another advantage, another weakness to create for black to take care of, which they can't take care of. g6, so the king can step up. Queen c7, the queen comes back into play. If we go back, the queen on a7, Is she somewhat out of play? Yeah, somewhat, yeah. Let's get her back in action. Queen c7. Avoid out of play pieces. Let's add that to our list. Let's go to the other side here. Avoid out of play pieces. The pieces have roles. Let's add that. Why don't we add that quickly? Piece roles. Piece can have an attacking role. Can have a defending role. It can have a dual role. Dual, not dull. I did not type this. A boring piece. No. Dual. Both attacking and defending role. And then there's the out of play role, which is the worst. The piece is doing nothing. So this queen comes back into play. Queen c7. And here we go. King h7, a5. There's a number of ways you can play the position as white. What's interesting is we never see a bishop h3 by white in this game, but it's always there. But Vignesh chooses to handle the position differently. He's seeking another passer, which is correct. I would not disagree with that. a5, and white has another passer on the b file. These two passers are going to be decisive unless black gets counterplay. Where's black's counterplay going to come against? It's going to go against the white king. Knight takes. You can't push the b pawn just yet. Knight takes. Knight d3. Knight d3 to interrupt communication between the rook on d1 and the d7 pawn. Black must stop this d pawn. Otherwise, here comes this b pawn, and there's too many pawns to deal with. White will win. So, knight d3, bishop takes, and now rook d6, going after the d7 pawn. You're not just going to drop the pawn. You are not going to drop the pawn, so you need to reestablish communication. Bishop e2. Now the rook is helping, once again, to sustain with x-ray. The rook has x-ray sustainment on the d7 pawn. Take. Black's queen cannot come off the board. Black must keep the queen on the board with these trades. The queen must stay on the board. Otherwise, the rook has nothing to help it for the black pieces. So the rook takes instead. And here, we've lectured this game for, ever since Vignesh played it. And this position I have seen my students mismanage many times. Many times. Many times. It ain't over till it's over. And we see that discipline required here. Of course, Vignesh has it. And this is the only move to play in the position. What are my opponent's threats? What are black's threats? Well, black's threats are to go after the f-pawn. There's one attacker. The queen on f6 is hitting the f-pawn. It's sustained only by the king. If the king is the only defender, it's weak. Let's add that to our list. If the king is the only defender, it is weak. Can't move into check. The king cannot move into check. So, the queen needs a helper on f2. Who's it going to be? The rook. So, black to play. What would black do? Rook e2. Hitting the bishop, which is also a target. It is hanging. Let's write that down. Actually, we're not going to write let's just write the acronym. LPDO. Those of you at home, what does that stand for? LPDO. Loose pieces drop off. Play a strong player and you have loose pieces, they're coming off the board. And I don't mean because it's windy. And if it's that windy, use a triple weighted set. So, Rook d2 must be stopped. Vignesh plays knight c4. Remember when I used to teach at Portal Chess off Bollinger. And when I lived in Cupertino, I used to live on Bollinger, not off Bollinger, on Bollinger. And Portal, it's where I met Vignesh when he was in elementary school. And he was in Coach Sandy's class and going to NorCal House of Chess with Coach Ted. And they did a terrific job. I remember, I'm not a Facebook person at all, but I remember looking at one of Coach Ted's posts when he was down there coaching and Vignesh was playing in the, what was it? It was the Pan Am Games from I don't know what year. And Coach Ted took a picture of his breakfast in Mexico, and it was unbelievable. I was very envious of that breakfast. Of course, I've had it, but not that breakfast on that day. So, knight c4 hits the rook, covers d2, queen a1 check, and the king is still the target. The f-pawn is still weak. Akobian's kind of changing the position of the pieces to go after the f-pawn a little differently, but with the same pieces. The threat is still real on f2. Black to play here. What does black do? Queen e1, hitting the f-pawn, and it's over. If Akobian gets play on the f-pawn, white loses. It is over. So that must be stopped. Queen e7. If the queen goes to e1, the rook hangs. The queen has a defensive function. Does the queen like to guard anything? Not really. Not really. A passer is a little different, but the queen, generally speaking, doesn't like to guard anything. Let's add that to our notes. The queen doesn't like to guard anything. She's an attacking piece. So, king g7. To sustain the rook, allowing the queen on a1 to go to e1. And if this queen goes to e1, good night, white king. Check, please. So, king g7, white to play. Go ahead and pause the video if you want to take some time. This is over in one move. And I do not really understand why this move is difficult to find for some players. I have struggled with that for a number of years. But some techniques to come up with the winning move. Well, what are the targets? White to play. What are black's targets? The king. The f-pawn is pinned. This rook does not have a lot of operating room. It basically can't really move anywhere. How do we take advantage? Well, pattern recognition, of course. The rook and king with this relationship, we see knight d6. Where is the knight going next? It's going to e8. With tempo, with tempo. Knight e8 cannot be stopped. Here, black's position has entirely crumbled. Everything is basically hanging except for the queen. Black resigns after knight d6. One of my favorite games, very inspirational for many different reasons. One thing that's very interesting about chess is that the kids, the students, inspire everybody, including adults. And perhaps that's true in other disciplines, but I know that's very common in chess. This was a lot of fun. When this came up on the ticker, I remember it being mentioned. I don't know if those streams are on YouTube, but if you're one of the local kids, check it out. It was a lot of fun to watch the live stream. It was a lot of fun to see this result come up. And I'm not sure when I first saw the moves for the game, but I've heard Vignesh lecture this game at my club, and I've heard his input on it. I've gone over this game many, many times. I think it's just fantastic. He had an opportunity and took advantage. He threw his hat over the wall and then went and got it. This is one of my very favorite games. Vignesh Panchanatham with the white pieces against Varuzhan Akobian, Millionaire chess, the first round, 2015. If you've got an opportunity, make the most of it. Thank you for watching.